Roger, watching TVC Breakfast. The Economic Community of West African States have called for the immediate release and reinstatement of Mohamed Bazoum as the legitimate and democratically elected president of Niger Republic. The regional body also imposed stiff sanctions on Niger Republic, which includes a no-fly zone over the country and an option to use force if the coup plotters fail to relinquish power within 1 week. TVC News State House correspondent Femi Akonde reports on this.
Strong sanctions expected to strangulate the government of the coup plotters in Niger Republic have been announced by ECOWAS. The coup in Niger is a setback to recent efforts made by the regional body to strengthen democracy and reject all forms of military takeovers. President Bola Tinubu, as chairperson of ECOWAS, wants member countries to comply with the sanctions imposed and remain resolute until constitutional order is restored in Niger Republic.
Disrupting the democratic order has left the people in a state of uncertainty and vulnerability. I've briefed some of you about the actions that I've taken. I'm prepared to abide by all resolution necessary to respond to this assault and to make sure that our colleague, the President Bazoum, is safe and that democracy is restored in Niger Republic.
The president of the ECOWAS Commission insists Mohamed Bazoum remains the legitimate leader of the landlocked West African country.
Resolve as follows. 1. His Excellency President Mohamed Bazoum remains the legitimate, elected President and Head of State of the Republic of Niger, recognized by ECOWAS, the African Union, and the international community. 2. Condemn in the strongest terms the attempted overthrow of constitutional order in Niger and the illegal detention of His Excellency President Mohamed Bazoum, President and Head of State of Niger, as well as members of his family and government. Call for the immediate release and reinstatement of President Mohamed Bazoum as President and Head of State of the Republic of Niger. In the event the authorities' demands are not met within 1 week, take all measures necessary to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger. Such measures may include the use of force.
There are fresh hopes that the regional body will find its teeth and bite. Femi Akonde, TVC News, Abuja.
All right, that's the background to our discussion. Joining us in the studio is the President, Directors Guild of Nigeria and Global Affairs Analyst or Global Affairs Commentator, Victor Ohai. It's nice to have you join us this morning.
A pleasure.
Great.
Being back.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, ECOWAS, through its leader, President Bola Tinubu of Nigeria, was emphatic. In fact, he didn't mince any words. If you saw his body language, for those who are specialists in that, it tells you how resolute he wants to take ECOWAS into as far as the issues in Niger Republic is. But is it possible there could be war in Niger Republic in about a week? What do you see?
What I see is somehow a hasty decision. You might say decisive.
Hasty?
Yes. The reason is what confers legitimacy on a government is the people. It's not external forces. It's not ECOWAS, not the regional, because at the end of the day, power is derived from the people. It's important to know what the situation on ground is in Niger. If the people have accepted what has happened, it's going to be difficult, and it will amount to interference from foreign powers. But that's not to say that I mean, coup is something obviously, first of all, it's undemocratic, we know that. It's not the better way of, changing governments and all that. It's still better to go through the ballot than by the bullet. So I think that ECOWAS, you may say we did it before in the Gambia. Yeah, Jammeh, fled, as a matter of fact. That happened. But the situation now is different. It's important to look at what's happening on in the sub-region. First, I think Burkina Faso, and then Mali, and now Niger. Could this be a reaction against, perhaps you might say, France? And could Russia also be involved in what is going on?
That's a question, because we saw a lot of Nigerians on the streets chanting up Russia, up Putin and things like that. So one is beginning to, what is the Russian connection to all of these?
Well, first of all, we know that Russians, and especially Putin, are great chess players. And so things don't always appear the way they seem on the surface. You've got to be able to look at the subtext of what's happening, look at, it's not what you see usually, but perhaps where the game is leading. If you can read it, that is more important. I see the last vestiges of colonialism breaking down the Francophone countries. For so long, they've been, emasculated by France. With the war in Ukraine right now, the Russian-Ukrainian war, there's a lot of attention in that region, NATO, the United States, and all that. What is probably happening here could be a distraction from that as well. And if you notice the tone from countries like South Africa in recent times, of course, they are members of BRICS. They are now more favorably disposed towards Russia and Russian affairs. Putin himself recently said they have military pacts with over 40 African countries. I mean, I'm dropping this information now.
And including Nigeria.
Yeah, okay. So they have all of these agreements. They fooled the war recently with the so-called Wagner thing, but that was just an excuse to get into Belarus and get close to Poland. So a lot of things are happening. And if you don't step back and you just jump into it, we're going to create problems for ourselves. We have enough problems at hand already. I'm talking about West Africa. I'm not talking about just Nigeria. With, the militancy and all the Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the other forces. Now, so we're on a thread right now, the entire region. And if we do decide to go and attack Niger as a regional group, I think that what may come afterwards may not be pleasant for us. There are other ways. Politics is war by other means, or diplomacy rather is war by other means. We must not start, I mean, the initial no-fly zone and the rest, well, you can do that. Although I don't see how effective that could be, because the North African countries are not saying anything. At least I haven't heard anything from them yet. And if you're imposing a no-fly zone, they have a border in the north. You understand what I'm saying?
You can't compel a non-ECOWAS country to close their border.
Exactly. So they have alternatives, So, and with what we saw, I saw the image when, the report started of people on the streets rejoicing and then talking about Russia. What is happening right now is simply that, you saw Mali already. I'll come back to Russia. Mali, they are saying to France, we don't need you anymore. Burkina Faso, the same thing. Now, Niger.
Exactly.
And America, just to let you know where the interests truly are, I don't know when America suddenly became interested in ECOWAS affairs or West African affairs. Suddenly, the VP is calling, the Secretary of State is calling the ECOWAS chairman, own president, and saying to them, no, you must not allow this. So they want to start a war by proxy here. And if we're not careful, I mean, the casualties are going to be here. Nothing is going to happen to them over there, you know. If that starts, the Russians, you know, Wagner is already in the region.
Continent.
Yes, they are. And for all you know, Wagner may even be, they may not just be white-skinned, Wagner may also be black-skinned, you know. They may already have been training people. So what you see here now happening is, let's look at the components of BRICS.
Before we get there, let me just quickly ask now, because there are so many dimensions to
that
this,
are coming up. We'll treat them.
You're doing a fine job of unearthing them. I'm trying to keep up with you, but then I must ask at this point now, what you think the problem could have been. That is even a rather pedestrian, question in my view. But what I'm driving at is looking at the coupists, what they said now, that it was due to the deteriorating situation in the country, talking about security, talking about the jihadist agenda in the country. So, and what you think the options of President Bazoum could be right now if he could really be reassured by the position of ECOWAS? If you look at the root causes, why the military intervened the way they did, and Bazoum's options now?
Coups, before a coup can take place, there would usually be an atmosphere, if you like, for coup, because you need to have reasons. You might say the usual suspects, insecurity, economic crisis, and all that. Corruption and the rest. But if you see, the antidote to coup is good governance, and you must be popular with your people. Okay? So Bazoum, I think the real issues are personality conflicts between Bazoum and Chiani himself. Bazoum inherited Chiani, but he also needed Chiani because Chiani is the head of the elite guard. Yes, So for him for his own personal security, he needed it. But Chiani became too powerful as well, and they had personality clashes. And when things like that happen, you have, especially when the military person or the guard knows that you are in a weak position, that you are really dependent on him. And then you begin to have personality clashes, which was what was happening to them in recent times. And in the streets, when people start complaining, that's all the trigger you need. And so that's probably what would have, that's what created the atmosphere for it. So that's just, this is what has happened, and they took advantage of it. And when you are in the corridors of power at that level, with that level of influence and possibly popularity, Chiani is also very much loved. Soon you begin to see yourself as the all-time president. Of course, you can't have two captains in a boat. So this had to happen. But more importantly, these are pawns in the hands of the superpowers, okay? Russia is trying to get more influence across Africa, and they are indeed doing that, okay? I was talking about the components of BRICS. If you notice there, I won't even talk about Brazil right now, but Russia and China have always been allies. No matter how China is palling with America right now.
All right, let me put you on hold.
Okay.
Now that you have delved into BRICS, I'll come back and then you continue on that, because there are intertwined threads in there. Right, you're watching TVC Breakfast. On this segment, we're talking about Niger Republic. There has been a coup there, and an emergency meeting of ECOWAS heads of state was called by the chairman, who is the president of Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu, and they have read out their Riot Act, and imposing stiff sanctions on Niger Republic. Of course, there are reactions here and there. We also see how world powers are commenting and reacting to the coup in Niger Republic. On the other hand, if you go down into Niger, the reaction of the people, the residents and indigents and citizens of Niger is quite different from what world powers, the direction of the world powers. So what are the underlying things? These are some of the things we're talking about. And Victor Khai, a global affairs commentator and President, Directors Guild of Nigeria, is here making sense of all of these issues for us. Now, Victor, you were talking about the BRICS.
Yes.
That is also another line of discussion that maybe a lot of persons may not have seen. Recall that a lot of countries, in fact, so many African countries, about 41 countries across the world have applied to become members of BRICS. So speak to us. You were talking about BRICS earlier.
Okay, so to be public enemy number one for America, if you threaten the economic interests, it doesn't matter who you are, they'll go after you. BRICS is about to have its own currency as well. Everyone wants to break away from the dollar. They want to be independent. And at the head of BRICS is China and Russia. It doesn't matter that India is palling with America right now, their president, but their interests are aligned. And we have South Africa here as well. And if you notice the speak from South Africa right now, it's pro-Russia, okay? So it is what BRICS itself is posing an existential threat to NATO, to the Western powers. And what you see happening is a situation where you may look at Niger and think it's just about Niger, but if you study the pattern already, they are dismantling what I would call the last vestiges of colonialism in the Francophone countries, especially in the sub-region. And Russia is, through Wagner, they are empowering and installing, if you want to call them stooges now or whatever, they're beginning to do that right now. And America is not finding it funny. BRICS is, I don't know what to call the economic power now for, not call it as NATO now, but for the Western forces.
The G7, the G20.
Okay, exactly. Call them G7, G20 or whatever. This is an emerging force right now. And you just said that so many more countries. There was a time I thought it was going to even be BRICS. Nigeria was supposed to be in it, but for some reason we're not there yet. Okay, so many countries are tired of what's going on, you know. And so BRICS is now becoming an alternative power force. So it's no longer about one country. It's about 5 in the first instance, and then all these allies. Remember I told you in the beginning that Putin himself said they have military pacts now with over 40 African countries. Now that's worrisome. Maybe not for us, but for the West, you know. So it gives them concern. So as it is right now, the fight is for the soul of Africa at the end of the day, because quite frankly, this is the richest continent, potentially, and indeed, if we can harness what we have, you understand, in the world. And the economies of many countries depends on Africa. Whoever controls Africa controls
world economy.
Will determine, you know, what happens in the world. You know, you can't, most manufacturing will not happen in the West without raw materials from here. There's been so much exploitation, and exploitations continue. But the good thing is that now we go to the same schools as they go. We're exposed to the same knowledge as they have, and we can sit at the table and negotiate. Now you know that change does not come easily. Some powers would not want to allow that, and that's why they do coups. And don't forget, it's not just Russia. The Americans themselves have sponsored so many coups. I recall a video I saw where the new chief of defense of the U.S., a black guy with a member of Congress, when he was attacking them of sponsoring coups, you know, on the continent for their own selfish reasons. We have seen what they've done to so many other countries as well. So it just tells you that, as I said earlier on, we are just pawns in their hands.
All right.
So it's now the G7 versus the BRICS, but the battleground is Africa.
Right, and the tail end of my earlier question was what President Bazoum's options are.
Yes.
Some say they appear to be limited right now. And okay, but first address that, and then I can, ask another question.
See, if Bazoum had the confidence of his people or the support of Nigerians, it would be in a stronger position. But the problem right now is that, he's like just by himself. The people of Niger have already come to terms with what is happening. Now, this is not very healthy for the ECOWAS presidents. For them, it poses an existential threat, because if that happens there, it means it can happen in another place, Already 3 have gone down: Burkina Faso, Mali, now Niger. The question is, who next?
Who is next?
Do you want to wait for the knife to be on your neck before? So they are being, I don't know whether to say reactionary or being proactive right now in taking the step. But we must be careful. Discretion is the better part of valor. You cannot just jump into something that you don't understand very well. If we get into this and start a war, remember, we don't have ECOMOG anymore. We have to reconstitute a military force if we have to. If we get into that place, we'll be dabbling into their internal affairs. That's against international law. Whether you like what they do or not is a different matter. You can impose your sanctions from where you are. Decide to say, I'm not doing business with you again. That's fine. But to go and militarily, yes, the Americans do it and they get away with it, but that's because they can. Other powers in the West may try it with a coalition. What the Americans do, they don't just do it alone. What they do is they will get a coalition and then go in and do it. But that's America. We have to be careful. Look at what happened in Ukraine. America encouraged Ukraine into this war. Now they're selling military hardware and just using them to scatter Russia and scatter Ukraine and the rest of it, and just hoping that a bullet may just fall into any of their territories.
Any of the,
exactly.
Of the other
and
allies.
Then they'll have an excuse to test their ammunition. So and so if anything happens here, we must not fool ourselves. The Americans will not put boots on the ground for us. It's our people that will die. The spillover, and under international law as well, if there's a refugee crisis, you cannot stop them from entering your country. You must admit them. Are we ready right now in the state of our economy? I don't think we should say because...
And Nigeria will be the ready-made country for refugees from Niger to pour into.
There are already enough of them here, but you can be sure that more of them will come here. More of them will come here. We don't really have a border. So.
And another thing is, what is even the power? How fierce are ECOWAS powers right now, even in the Mali situation? Now, despite the coup that happened there, and despite the sanctions that ECOWAS levied on the soldiers then, they were able to buy some time, and now elections will hold in January or thereabout next year.
In February.
In February
that's what I thought. That's what I thought ECOWAS should do. Well, they might say bring Bazoum back, but the people are already proving. I saw a video of their finance minister who was given 24 hours or so to
48
account.
hours.
48 hours to account or be executed. And so if they come up with proof now that Bazoum was corrupt, that he had done all this under their laws and all that, are you going to say, what are you going to do about it? And we must be careful because, you see, for Chiani, for instance, he knows that this is about his survival. If he cannot come out of this, either he wins or is done for. So is he going to sit down and watch that happens? Right now they have the president as a point in their hand, but they will not have any qualms about eliminating him if his existence, if he's remaining alive, will pose a threat.
Who are they?
Chiani, the new
okay.
Yes. So if they do that and then say it was, accidental discharge.
No, of course.
Anything could happen.
It was because you attacked, and the bullet from one of you cut him. It could be anything.
And then they accuse them of killing the man, and what happens? So what you want to do, at the end of the day, dialogue will still do it. You know, if he goes into exile, if he's sufficiently popular, I think what they should have negotiated is for him to leave the country, but not while he's in the country. When he goes out, you can continue your negotiations. But while he's there and you attack, we can't win it.
Now, let's talk about Africa. Recall that President Tinubu attending the AU Pali recently in Kenya talked about the fact that Africa shouldn't be that, you know, a place where there is a scramble, that there can't be a fresh scramble for the African continent anymore. But if you see what's happening from what you have said, you know, the presence of Russia on the African continent, moving from place to place. You recall that Africa-Russia summit just ended a few days ago. China is here, the West is here, and so on. And then there seemed to be some kind of struggle by proxy. Are we still seeing, just in a minute, are we still seeing the scramble for Africa in a different light, not the way it used to be before anymore?
But obviously that's what's happening. I said it earlier on, that the battle is for the soul of Africa. Africa is, how do I put it now, is where the economy of the world depends on Africa. Whoever controls Africa leads. It's very obvious, you know. So that's what's happening. And but the thing is that Africans themselves are beginning to realize their powers, and for the West, that's not very good. So if they can divide and rule us, the better. You know.
All right, we have to leave it here now. Victor Okai, thank you so much for your insight, you know, taking us into what the Wagner Group is doing, BRICS, and all of that is really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.